June 14th, 1892. Dear Martha, finally, we came to Silver Springs, right on the river. We needed food and other things, but we didn't have a penny. We tied up Wanda's boat and tried to think. We needed money bad. I said, I know you've seen this bracelet that I wear every day, but I can't sell it. He said, did your mama give it to you or your granny? I said, no. For some reason, I didn't want to tell the story of Althea Tomlinson and her husband. He said, I wouldn't ask you to sell it. It's about the prettiest thing I've ever seen. What about the boat? Wanda said to use it however it would help us. We needed money. We needed food. I said, try to get some money for the boat. I'll go look to see if we can find work. We agreed to meet at noon when the sun was straight overhead. Town seemed friendly enough. I walked to the feed store, dry goods store, dentist. No one had any work. There was a cafe. The smell of the sausage and chicken they were grilling out back made my stomach rumble. But what I saw in the window of the cafe was worse than being hungry. There was a poster in the window with an artist's picture of a girl and a boy. The girl had braids and looked something like me. She was wearing a gingham dress. The boy had shaggy hair and looked a little like Pap when he was a boy. The poster said, 2 runaway children sought by their heartbroken parents. Please notify Jimbo and Verna Dudd and McCanopy. I wanted to run and hide. I looked around for Jimbo Dudd. Was he here? Was he watching me? Would the sheriff recognize us and put us in jail until he could return us to Jimbo and Verna? Daniel found me. He had a proud grin on his face and $15 in his hand. He said, look what I got for the boat. I said, great. Look what I found. I pointed to the poster. He said, why do I get the feeling that poster has something to do with us? I remembered he couldn't read well. I read, 2 runaway children sought by their heartbroken parents. Please notify Jimbo and Verna Dudd and McCanopy. Daniel said, uh-oh, now what? I said, we can't think when we're this hungry. Let's get something to eat, and then we can come up with a plan. We'll have to spend carefully. This money will have to last. We bought 3 big sausages at the cafe, 1 for each of us and 1 for Ethel. Ethel wolfed his in 3 bites. Then looked at me with begging eyes. The cook had a big ham bone and sold it to us for 3 cents, so Ethel settled down happily to eat his bone. Daniel and I each got an ear of corn to go with our sausage. My stomach growled noisily. We felt much better after we had eaten. I said, we got $14.57 left. Let's go to the store and buy what we need to get us through another day or two. Then we'll get out of town. When we got to the store, Daniel pointed to the poster in the window. He said, looks like a circus. What does it say? I read aloud, Ringling Brothers, United Monster Shows, Great Double Circus, Royal European Menagerie Museum Caravan and Congress of Trained Animals here for 2 days. Now hiring boys. Must be 12 or older. Must be 12 or older. I looked at Daniel with my I've got an idea look. I said, could I pass for 12? Daniel said, you could pass for 12, but you couldn't pass for a boy. I said, want to bet? Love, Teddy. June 15th, 1892. Dear Martha, at the general store, we bought cheese, pickles, hard-boiled eggs, apples, carrots, jerky, bar soap, 2 work shirts, pair of overalls, underwear, hat, bandana, socks, a comb, and a bottle of black hair dye. Daniel said, what is hair dye? I said, you'll find out in a few minutes. We had $5.22 left. I put it in the neck pouch. There was a bathhouse where you could pay to take a bath for 10 cents. The woman in charge wasn't too friendly. I asked if she had some scissors I could borrow. She said, I don't have any scissors you can borrow. but I have some scissors you can rent. She charged us another 10 cents to rent the scissors, but we needed them, so we didn't have a choice. Right away, I took Daniel out of the backyard. I said, they're looking for a girl and a boy. You're going to cut my hair so I look like a boy. Then I'm going to cut your hair and dye it black so you look like a different boy. Daniel went crazy. I don't know how to cut your hair, and you don't know how to cut my hair, and I ain't dyeing my hair black. He glared at me. I said, then we'll have to split up. They're looking for a girl and a boy. Here's a picture of us on the poster, remember? Who knows how many posters are up in this town and other towns? We could be picked up by the sheriff at any moment. Jimbo himself might be here. Burn it too. Daniel said, what style do you want? I sat on a wooden box and pulled it up close to the window so I could see my reflection. I said, there's nothing to it. Cut my braids off and we'll even it up. Daniel cut my braids off in 2 seconds. And I shook out the rest of my hair and he cut it even across the bottom. I said, we better go a little shorter. He cut more off. I looked at my reflection, turning this way and that. I parted my hair and combed it to the side. I said, that does it. Daniel sat on the box so I could cut his hair. I'd seen Mama cut Pap's hair many times. Problem was, I couldn't get the comb through Daniel's hair. I said, you're going to have to bathe first and shampoo your hair. It's in knots and I can't get the comb through it. I handed him the soap and he went off to bathe while I waited with Ethel. When he came back, he was all scrubbed and clean, combed his wet hair and started cutting. I smiled. Terrific. Look how good you look. He looked at his reflection and felt the sides of the bottom of his hair. I said, I read the directions for the hair dye while you were in the tub. Work this into your hair, wait 10 minutes, and then wash it off. Oh, and be sure to scrub it off your hands as soon as you finish working it into your hair so it won't stain your hands. Daniel practically shouted, I have to take another bath? The woman charged us another dime for Daniel's second bath. He came back about a half hour later. He looked like a totally different kid. One with short black hair. This time he was wearing his new shirt and overalls. He said, not bad, huh? I said, not bad. I wish Wanda could see you now. He grinned. I wish she could see you. You look like a boy for true. And you don't even have to change your name because Teddy's a boy's name. It was true. Wanda would have loved the adventure of it. I put the hat on my head. It felt strange not to feel braids hanging down. Counted our money. We have $4.82 left. That won't go far. I divided up our things and bundled them into our bandanas. Daniel cut 2 new sticks and tied a bandana to the end of each one. We slung the bundles over our shoulders and headed off for the circus. Love, Teddy. June 16th, 1892. Dear Martha, Daniel and I walked towards the edge of town where they had set up the circus. We knew we were there when we saw an enormous striped tent. It looked almost big enough to cover a small town. We heard music, loud clapping, and laughter coming from inside. We walked around back to see if we could find where they were hiring folks. A man with a big straw hat saw the two of us standing there looking like we didn't know anything. He shouted, "You two, lend a hand with this ostrich." We jumped right over there and helped him load the gigantic bird into a cage. Martha, you won't believe it, but that bird was the size of a full-grown man. It was so big it looked like you could ride it. It had a fat, feathery body and a long, long neck. The bird's eyes made it look very intelligent, but they had long lashes above and below them. When the ostrich was safely in the cage, the man with the straw hat wiped his brow with his red bandana handkerchief. He said, "You on the show?" We said no. He said, "You want jobs, don't you? Better see Pete over at the Red Wagon." He walked us over to Pete, who was counting money and smoking a cigar. Pete didn't look up from his work. The man in the straw hat said, "Pete, I got 2 first of Mays for you." Pete said, You boys got folks?" I said, "It's just 2 of us. We're cousins." Pete said, "Cousins? Can cousins travel wherever we go?" I said, "Yes, but I have a dog that's got to come with me." Pete said, "A dog?" I said, "Yes, sir." he said. Keep them away from the lion cages. $1 a week plus food. Take it or leave it. Daniel said, when do we start? Pete said, 10 minutes ago. Elmer will show you the ropes. Elmer turned out to be the guy in the straw hat. He said, boys, you'll be watering the animals, but be careful. The last 2 1st of Mays got eaten by a lion. I looked at Daniel. His eyes got big. Elmer said, that was a joke. He'll be responsible for bringing water to all the cages, morning and night. You eat after every animal has been watered. You sleep after every animal has been watered. Got it? I said, what do we do in between? Elmer said, you obviously haven't hauled water for circus animals. In between you rest. Hungry? Come with me. I'll show you the chow house. We followed him. Elmer said, what are your names? Daniel said, I'm Daniel and this is Teddy. I said, and this is Ethelbert. Passed a pretty woman with long dark hair practicing balancing acts on a jumbo-sized rubber ball. Elmer said, Sabrina, these are the new 1st of Mays. Teddy, Daniel, and Ethelbert. Sabrina said, howdy, boys. Welcome to the show. Howdy, boys. Boys. I had passed it a boy. Jubilation. Love, Teddy. June 26, 1892. Dear Martha, do you know how many buckets of water you have to haul to water all the animals in a circus? I haven't been able to write for a while. There just hasn't been time. I don't even know what town we're in. We pack up and move every night to a new town. Besides, my hands were too sore to do anything but pick up the next bucket of water. Every muscle in my body aches. Our day starts at 5 o'clock in the morning. We go to the water wagon and start filling and hauling buckets. We go to each cage and fill the animals' water troughs with a funnel that sticks through the bars. And when we first started hauling, we only had the wire handle on each bucket to hold on to. The second day, I found a rubber hose someone had thrown away. Daniel and I cut the hose into lengths, slit each piece with a pocket knife, and fit them over the wire handles. Our handles made the buckets much easier to carry. Elmer said, you boys know how to use your noggins. The animals that need the most water are the elephants. They drink so much they have their own water wagon. That means we don't have to haul it as far, but we have to haul a lot of it. The elephants are all girls, even though they're referred to as bulls. Elmer said the circus doesn't keep male elephants because they're too dangerous. The elephant trainers are Susanna and Massimo, and they are from Italy. Susanna wears elegant costumes and rides the elephants' backs. She said, you two are certainly better than the last 2 water boys. They tried to give my girls dirty water, and they were always late. And I've seen you rub their trunks and bring them extra fruits. 4 days ago, Daniel and I were watching Massimo train Linda and Donabelle, 2 Indian elephant babies. Susanna said, if you boys want to earn a little cherry pie, you could start helping me get the elephants' costumes on for the matinee in the afternoon. I said, cherry pie? I love cherry pie. Susanna laughed at me. In the circus, cherry pie means extra pay for extra work. So now we help her and Massimo put the headpieces on the elephants and fasten them each day. You can't imagine how smart these animals are. Massimo says, left up, and they pick up their left feet. Massimo says, around the world, and they spin around in a circle. Massimo says, line grip, and they line up and grab each other's tails with their trunks. First elephant in the line is always the matriarch, Babette. The others line up behind her, from tallest to smallest, all the way down the line to Linda and Donabelle, the baby elephants. When the audience sees the little ones, they clap harder and laugh at how cute they are. We eat in the chow house. Daniel and I are always the last to eat. Food is good, and they want the workers to eat plenty, so we can work hard. We each sleep in a possum belly, a storage shelf under the wagons. We go to sleep to the smells and snorts and trumpets and growls of animals. The lions roar all night, but the loudest animals of all is the peacock. Have you ever heard a peacock's cry? It gives me the willies, as Jasper Lowe might say. The circus performers keep to themselves and don't mix with the work crew. Elmer said it's unusual for Susanna and Massimo to even associate with the likes of you two. The performers who work the midway have their own group, too, and they're friendlier with the work crew. I met a man whose entire body is covered in hair, including his face. Met a fire eater, a sword swallower, a woman whose neck is 10 inches long, covered in brass coils, and Lena, the alligator woman. Love, Teddy. June 27th, 1892. Dear Martha, yesterday afternoon, Susanna and Massimo were training the elephants. Susanna said, Teddy, Daniel, would you like to ride an elephant in the spec? We were astonished. The spec is the grand entrance into the big top to start the circus. She said, you'll have to practice with the girls. They seem to like you. The Ringlings like for our entrance to be a big production. I think it would add flair. Massimo called Saba for me. He said, Saba, trunk down. Saba knelt down and curled her trunk around to the side. Massimo said, step on. Don't be afraid. She'll do the work. You just hold on. I stepped on Saba's trunk and held on. She raised me up. Massimo said, now climb up on her neck, nice and easy. Just like that, I was up on her neck. It's the highest I've ever been, except for the balloon ride. Massimo led Saba around so she could get used to me and I could get used to her. After a while, he said, now, Teddy, you do it alone. The elephants have done this spec hundreds of times. So all you have to do is sit up there and look like you know what you're doing. I rode Saba around the empty ring until I felt comfortable. Massimo seemed impressed. I think you got it. Susanna said, hold on to her headdress with one hand, Teddy. Use your other hand to wave to the crowd. Soon, Daniel was doing the same thing on Denise, a pretty elephant with long eyelashes. The two of us couldn't quit smiling. I almost had to pinch myself to see if I was dreaming. What would Mama think? Susanna took us to Marie, the costumer. Do you have something these boys could wear? They're going to ride Saba and Denise in the spec. Marie found 2 costumes that looked somewhat near our sizes. She pinned the places that were too big so she could sew them. The shirts are made of shiny blue material with spangles and sequins sewn across the front. The black trousers are full and gathered at our ankles. She gave us each a pair of pointy shoes with tassels on the toes and bright red satin turbans. Daniel and I looked at ourselves in Marie's full-length looking glass. Susanna clapped her hands and said, they look so handsome. Daniel said, how in the world did we go from living in the woods to this? When she left, Marie said, handsome and pretty. She looked at me. I've been a costumer for 30 years. If you're a boy, I'll eat my hat. I felt like someone punched me in the stomach. If Marie turned me in, we'd have to leave the circus. I said, I have to look like a boy. I have to. Marie said, I think you'll fool everyone else, but honey, I do this for a living. She gave me a look. Relax. I know everyone's secrets around here, and I know how to keep my mouth shut. Tomorrow's our first performance. We will do 2 shows each day, a matinee and the big show, which means the evening show. In between, ticket holders visit the midway, buy food, play games, and walk by the animals' wagons. The minute we finish the big show, we start packing up to move to the next town. Another good thing happened that we weren't expecting. 3 more boys joined as first amaze. So Susanna arranged for Daniel and me to work only with the elephants from now on. She said, no more carrying water for the other animals. Only our girls. You'll cut up their fruit and vegetables and help Massimo bring their hay. Afterwards, you'll have to take a bath by 1 o'clock and change into your costumes. I couldn't believe our good luck. Daniel whispered, a bath every day? Are you kidding? Massimo said, from now on, you'll be considered performers. Beginning performers. Performers who are still working for their keep. But you won't be with the work crew. You'll bunk in the costume wagon instead of the possum's belly. $3 a week. Great buckets of butter beans. We are performers. Love, Teddy. June 28th, 1892. Dear Martha, why does trouble always come? Today was the big day Daniel and I were starting as performers. Just before 2 o'clock, Massimo led the elephants down the midway to the ring doors. canvas curtains that led to the big top. Daniel rode Denise and I rode Saba. The band played Entrance of the Gladiators. Everything went swell with the elephants. My face beamed and grinned from ear to ear, and I entered the ring and Saba's back. Massimo led the way, followed by Babette with Susanna on her back. As I rode past the crowd, I smiled and waved to all the little kids. As we went around the ring for the second time to give folks their money's worth, a kid threw an apple at one of the elephants. The ringmaster said, "Son, don't do that." And I looked to see who had done it. It was Verna Dudd's boy, Georgie. There sat Jimbo, Verna, and the rest of the family. Massimo gave the signal for the elephants to stop. Saba stopped right in front of Jimbo and Verna. My heart felt like one of the clowns was pounding on it with his bigger-than-life hammer. Massimo called, "Company, down." The elephants knelt, and that was my signal to stand up and wave. The crowd clapped like they'd seen something glorious. Jimbo and Verna were staring right at me, but they didn't seem to recognize me. I had to force myself not to jump off Saba's back and run away. All I could do was act like I was a performer who had been doing this all my life. As Daniel and I stood on our elephants' backs, the ringmaster called, "Massimo and Susanna, and the amazing Ternecki brothers." Who? No one had told us that we were now the Ternecki brothers. We rode the elephants back out of the ring so Susanna could perform her tricks with Babette. As soon as Daniel and I were alone, I said, "We got trouble. Jimbo's here. Jimbo Dudd." Daniel said, "Jimbo Dudd? Are you sure?" I said, "You know the kid that threw the apple at Mindy? That was Georgie." All the color drained out of Daniel's face. He said, "Did he recognize you?" I said, "I don't think so. I don't know for sure, though." Between the shows, Marie came to see us. She waited until Susanna and Massimo weren't around. She said, "I thought you'd want to know. Someone's snooping around asking questions out on the midway. They're looking for two runaways, a boy and a girl." I sank right down to my feet and sat there with my head in my hands. I said, "They can't find us. He's trying to steal my pap's land. They want to put us in an orphanage." Marie said, "I don't think they'll get any information here. Circus folks don't talk to townies. I just came to warn you." Daniel said, "We'll run away again if we have to, Teddy." The thought of running away again filled me with sadness. Today I had ridden an elephant. Today I had been a circus performer. Suddenly we heard a commotion. We looked out at the midway. One of the monkeys had escaped from its cage. It jumped from wagon to wagon and then leaped to the top of the lemonade stand. The crowd gathered to see the naughty monkey run from his keeper. The monkey leaped on a dog's back and tried to ride him like a horse. This made everyone laugh so hard that some were almost falling down. Jimbo, Verna, and their kids were in the crowd. Georgie threw peanuts at the dog. Then he pulled on Jimbo's arm and whispered something in his ear. Daniel pointed. The dog was Ethelbert. Love, Teddy. June 29th, 1892. Dear Martha, Daniel and I had remembered to disguise ourselves, but we had forgotten that someone might recognize Ethelbert. Oh, Martha, why didn't we think of that? Thank goodness the circus was leaving town that evening. Daniel and I fed Ethel and hid him in the costume wagon. We finished the second show, changed into our work clothes, and tried to stay out of sight as we helped Massimo and Susanna get the elephants back in their wagons and ready to roll. Just before we left, I heard a familiar voice coming from the other side of Saba's cage. It was Jimbo Dudd. He was talking to Massimo in an ugly tone. I crouched down out of sight. Jimbo said, "They think I'm too dumb to follow their tracks, but they can't fool old Jimbo Dudd. I saw their writing on the river bank. There's two of them, a boy and a girl. She took off with something that belongs to me." Listening to Jimbo's lies made my heart ache. Liar, liar, pants on fire. Jimbo said, "I know they're here. My boy saw their mangy dog." Massimo said, "Please leave this area immediately. My elephants don't like strangers, especially men. My wife has told you that we haven't seen the persons you speak of. They are only ourselves here and our nephews, the Ternecki brothers." Jimbo wouldn't leave. "What are their names?" Massimo said their names are none of your business, but since you persist in being rude, their names are Vincelli and Guardamo. Now, if I have to ask you to leave again, I'll have you thrown out. Jimbo said, "It's a free country. I'll leave when I'm good and ready." All this time, Saba had been drinking water, sucking it up her trunk and squirting it into her mouth. Now she raised her trunk and blew a blast of water at Jimbo Dud. His face turned deep, angry red, and he left in a huff, dripping water and cursing. Massimo looked at Saba and laughed. He said, "You're a smart girl, Saba. You are the smartest girl." I was shaking from fear, but I couldn't wait to tell Daniel what Saba had done to Jimbo. Massimo turned the corner and almost ran into me. He looked at me with his kind eyes. I said, "It's not true, you know. He's trying to steal something from me that belongs to my pap." Massimo said, "Teddy, I know you're a good kid." I said, "How do you know, Massimo?" He said, "The elephants told me." I looked puzzled. He said, "Elephants have a sixth sense. They only trust people who are trustworthy." I said, "Can I stay? Can Daniel stay?" He said, "No, I'm sorry. There is no job for Teddy and Daniel here." My heart skipped a beat. Massimo said their jobs have been taken over by Vincelli and Guardamo, the Tornecchi brothers. In my relief, I threw my right hand in the air like a salute to the crowd. I shouted, "Non te la prender," an expression Susanna and Massimo use all the time. He smiled and said, "Sta facendo il pappagallo." 5 minutes later, we were on the roll. Every mile took us further away from Jimbo Dud. Love, Teddy. June 30th, 1892. The circus is headed to Jacksonville. We're going there for the 4th of July celebration. Every day we stop in little towns along the way to set up Big Top. As we come to town, the workers set up the tent, using some of the elephants to help pull up the big poles that hold up the tent. Poles are actually ship masts, so they're tall and extremely strong. While the workers are setting up, the performers parade through the town with the animal wagons, the clowns, and the elephants. Daniel and I are getting good at riding Denise and Saba in the parades. The ringmaster leads the way, and we invite all the onlookers to come to the circus that afternoon. When I'm on Saba's back, I'm at least 10 feet up in the air, so I can see everything happening below. We're getting to know the circus, which is quite fascinating. The clowns have their own society. They work and practice and eat together, along with their trained dogs. They have many props, like their high chair, their giant baby bottle, their fake mirror, and huge bed they all pile into at the end of their act. The acrobats start their daily practice every morning as soon as the big top is set up. They make sure their ropes and trapeze are all safe. Then they dust their hands with powdered resin to make sure they can grip without slipping. They leap off the platform, swing out, flip, catch each other by their ankles. The animal trainers have their own areas to set up and practice with their animals. The elephants always have their own place, apart from the other animals. I guess elephants are so big they make other animals nervous. Susanna and Massimo have been with Ringling Brothers Circus a long time, so they're very important to the circus. Sometimes Massimo has to demand things like fresh water and better fruits and vegetables to help the elephants. He's also very careful about who can come near the elephants. He warned, "No one goes near the elephants except for the 4 of us. Do you understand?" We passed another spring the other day. This one was shallow and clear and bright blue. We didn't have a show the next day, so we stopped the wagons to allow the elephants to take a bath. It was a sight. I will have to draw my sketchbook. Massimo led Babette, and she led the other elephants down to the spring. She looked at the water, turning her head this way and that, and then stepped in. It was an extra hot day, and I know the elephants were miserable in the heat. When Babette felt the cool water, she trumpeted loud and long, calling the other elephants to join her. Soon they were in the water, rolling and blowing and snorting. Massimo gave me and Daniel some long brushes with wooden handles. He spoke to Babette, and she rolled over on her side. She was so big that half of her was sticking up out of the water. The 3 of us crawled up on her side and scrubbed her with the brushes. She loved it. After a while, Massimo told us to get down, and he gave another command, and Babette rolled over on the other side. And we looked, Daniel and me, and as if to say, "Well, get busy scrubbing this side." We spent several hours scrubbing elephants. Their bodies are immense, titanic, colossal, gargantuan. While they were in the water, Susanna asked some of the workers to shovel out their cages and wash them down with buckets of fresh water. They formed a bucket brigade. About 40 men lined up from the springs to the elephant wagons. They passed the full buckets from man to man until they reached the wagons. The last 3 men splashed the buckets of water into the wagons, washing them down. Susanna called, "Thanks, guys. Next time you get paid, expect some cherry pie." They cheered. Circus men love both kinds of cherry pie. Daniel and I are glad to be somewhere where we feel like we're part of a big family. Love, Teddy.